Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. Next up on our team previews, we're going to be looking at the Penn State Nittany Lions. And joining us back on the channel, hopping back on with us is Dylan. Dylan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Connor. Really appreciate having me back on the podcast. I had a great time talking Minnesota last time, and I'm excited to talk Penn State here.
Yeah, you did a really good job covering the Golden Gophers for us and giving us great in-depth analysis there. And we're going to be doing the same here with the Nittany Lions. And they've been one of the more talked about teams since last season concluded. There's some preseason national title hope with the Nittany Lions. They've been, again, one of the most talked about teams for this offseason. When you talk about the 2025 landscape of college football, one of the top pictures you're going to see is Penn State and James Franklin. They've been, again,
Yep.
that talked about this year. And so
Yep.
we'll get into some of those hot topic kind of questions later on in the channel for what the expectations should be for Penn State this year. But starting off with the Penn State offense, and they return a lot, as does any team that gets a lot of this preseason discussion. They're going to bring back a ton of production. Obviously, the Nittany Lions do. And so we'll start off at quarterback. Drew Aller, he's back for another year. Overall, what's the expectation for him? Do you think he can take that next step?
Yeah, I mean, the expectation is for him to take that next step, right? We saw, I think, a pretty good step for the most part in year two. Got a little shaky as the season progressed into those bigger games. We saw how that Notre Dame game went. That was a terrible performance by Drew, and he knows it. Everybody knows it. He said this offseason that it took him a couple days to kind of get over that game, maybe a week or so. And then once Penn State kind of started getting into winter workouts, he was able to move off of that game and get back into focus for the 2025 season. But if Penn State's going to be a national championship contender in 2025, if they're going to take that next step, he needs to take that next step. You know, ever since he stepped foot on campus, the conversation has been this is the best quarterback that Penn State has had since Kerry Collins in the 90s. Even better than Christian Hackenberg coming out of high school. This is their best pro style quarterback, their best pro prospect at quarterback since Kerry Collins. And I agree with that 100%. And he's shown a lot of positives in terms of being an NFL prospect going forward. And he could very well be a first round pick come April. But he needs to take that step this year, especially in those big games. You know, he does a great job of being accurate for the most part, of limiting turnovers for the most part. His turnovers went up a little bit last year, but he also took more risks that he didn't take in 2023, which is something we wanted to see last year, was him kind of forcing the ball a little bit more downfield and taking those risks. And it worked out sometimes, sometimes it didn't. This fall, it's going to be about how can he perform against the likes of Oregon, Ohio State, and then when Penn State most likely gets to the college football playoffs. If he can step up in those big games, Penn State has a great chance to make a run at a national championship this year with what they have around him. And he has a great chance of solidifying himself as one of the top two, three quarterbacks in next year's draft, if not the number one quarterback. I think he has the potential to be a 1-1 guy, depending on who else comes out. He's gonna, be a combine and pro day darling. He's gonna test probably rather decently as well for a pro style quarterback. So I think he's gonna have all that going for him. It's just a matter of can he put it together on the field this fall and take that next step, which I do think he will.
And helping Drew take that next step will be what is looking like a much improved receiving core. And Penn State brought in three huge names from the transfer portal: Kyron Hudson from USC, Devontae Ross from Troy, and then most recently Trevor Pena from Syracuse. So, Dylan, what's this is probably the best receiving room for Penn State, and I mean, you can answer that question for, I mean, for what, 4 or 5 years, probably.
It has the potential, for sure. Seeing what the upside is with guys like Devontae Ross and Pena, I definitely think the upside is there for it to be their best wide receiving core since those 2017, 2018, 2019 teams. Right now, I'd probably put it kind of around that 2023 room that had Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley, Keandre Lambert Smith, sorry, 2022 room that had Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley, and Keandre Lambert Smith. None of those guys were really number one wide receivers, but all really good number two guys. I kind of see that as kind of the floor this season. But yeah, definitely has a chance to be a really good wide receiver room, and by far the best that Drew has had at his disposal through his now 3 years as a starting quarterback.
Who do you think is likely to be like the go-to guy, or do you think that all three of these guys will probably have similar amount of catches?
Um, I think I would lean towards Trevor Pena being the number one wide receiver right now. But I think at the end of the day, statistically, it's probably going to be all around, the same area. Probably, I think between the three, whoever's number one, whoever's number three, there's maybe 10, 12 receptions in between them. I think it's going to be pretty split pretty evenly between the trio. If it's not Trevor Pena, I think Kyron Hudson could maybe be that not a true number one guy, but lead the team in receptions and maybe yards, just because I think he has the most consistent hands. He's going to be a really nice third down guy, red zone type guy. He's really good at making those contested catches as well. So I think he could kind of be that safety valve for Drew this season, kind of how he used Tyler Warren last year. So I wouldn't be shocked if it's him, but I think overall that as long as they all stay healthy, they'll be around the same statistical points.
So if it's if it's not one of those three guys that um becomes like a household name, what guy in this receiving core could become a household name from like from the youngsters?
From the young guys, it'd probably be the redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman Tyzier Denmark, former four-star recruit. Played a little bit for Penn State last year, especially as the season went on. But he's somebody who they believe can really develop into I don't want to throw around the word game changing because I feel like that comes with too much of a in terms of people would expect 1,000+ yards, but I think he can turn into a pretty big contributor for them on the offensive side of the ball at wide receiver down the road. Maybe as soon as this year, but he's got the size, he has the athleticism and speed to do so as well. So I would say probably Tyzier Denmark is a guy. That is the thing about the wide receiver room right now is that beyond the starters, it's still a very big question mark for Penn State this season about who else is really going to emerge in that room. They have redshirt freshman Peter Gonzalez coming off of a torn ACL, but they really are big on him. Redshirt junior Anthony Ivy has been around the block now a few times with the program. Liam Clifford is who he is at this point, solid, but nothing spectacular. And then they have a couple other guys in that room, Caden Saunders, Josiah Brown, who both could maybe earn some roles this year, but Caden Saunders now a fourth-year guy who is expected to really contribute as a true freshman and just hasn't found his footing yet. So there's a big question mark if he's ever going to. Um, I would say watch out for maybe Kobe Howard, a true freshman out of Florida this season. Don't expect big numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if he earns a spot in that wide receiver rotation. And but by the end of the season has 15 or so catches for 150, 200 yards, maybe a big catch along the way or a big touchdown. Just a really technically sound young wide receiver who may not be, the most explosive or athletic guy, but just does everything else really well. And I think that's going to help him as he transitions to the collegiate game.
So the offensive line returns five players that had at least 400 snaps last year. A lot of productions coming back for this unit. Is this a top five offensive line in the country, or would you say it's more like just like a top 10 offensive line in the country?
Um, hmm, I would lean towards top five. I think you look at what they're returning this season on the offensive line. Let me bring up my depth chart here. They're returning key stars and Drew Shelton. Olive Vega, Ione, Nick Dawkins, and then Cooper Cousins, not a starter last year, but played a lot as a true freshman. He's going to step in at right guard, replacing Salim Wormley this season. And then at right tackle, they kind of have a good problem to have in that both Nolan Rucci, who stepped up last season, late in the season and in the playoffs, he's returning for his senior season. Then they have Anthony Donka, a redshirt sophomore, who was spectacular as a redshirt freshman before going down in November with a torn ACL against Minnesota. He's going to be back at some point. So they have two legitimate guys who can start at right tackle this season for the Nittany Lions. Depend on health, we'll see who gets the nod early on. Both guys miss spring camp, so that will be something to watch. But the depth across the offensive line, while a little bit inexperienced outside of that right tackle spot, the upside is certainly there as well. So I like this offensive line, especially if they stay healthy. Drew Shelton is going to be a fourth year starter basically this year. Vega Ione has started a ton. Nick Dawkins, this is his second year starting, but I believe fifth year with the program. Cooper Cousins had a ton of experience as a true freshman, and then the two right tackles. So I'm big on this offensive line, and I think they're going to set up this Russian attack very well this season while also keeping Drew off the ground.
And the rushing attack probably is the best in the country this year
Yeah.
with Singleton and then Katron Allen. So uh, a lot of us are already very familiar with this running back room,
Yeah.
but I guess give us maybe like a hot take with this group, or is there something that as much as they're talked about that maybe we don't know about?
Oh man, that's really tough because everything it seems like everybody knows everything about these two, and rightfully so. This is the best running back duo in the country here. Um, I about the duo, I'm not sure I really got anything, but I will say that while the duo is really good, it's much more than just these two. Penn State is going to be a threat no matter who's in that backfield this year, because their depth at the position is quite ridiculous. They have three young guys there who all can easily start in 2026 when these two are gone. Um, and Corey Smith, Quinton Martin, and um, they also have, of course, I'm playing on the third name right now. Sorry, Cam Wallace. He went down last season with a uh, two really serious ankle injuries on the same play against Kent State in September and missed most of the season. But they have three really good running backs behind them. I'm gonna go with the bold take that Singleton and Allen this season combined for let's go with um 3,000 total yards from scrimmage. I don't know what they had last year, so that may be a little low, but
Let's see.
uh, I think they can get to that 30,000 total. I mean,
They had
they
about what 2,200 rushing yards between them last year.
yeah, they had 22. They had 22 on rushing yards, and then they had about 500 receiving yards. So I think total yards from scrimmage, they could get to that 3,000 mark this season and even maybe push 30 touchdowns. I mean, they had 27 total touchdowns last year. So I'm gonna go bold take and say they go 3,030 combined between their total yards from scrimmage and touchdowns.
What run to pass ratio are you expecting for the Penn State offense this year?
Looking at last year, it was probably bad mental math here. So let me uh, do the math quickly here. It's probably about 60-30. I mean 60-40. Um,
So that would
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be similar. I think it's going to be, 55 to 50% run and about 43% pass. They're going to live and die with the run game for the most part. Maybe not live and die. I think they're going to live on the ground for the most part. They're going to throw the ball quite a bit just because they do have um, a really good wide receiver unit this year and a good tight end room. And then Nicholas Singleton can do plenty out of the backfield as well. But I mean, when you have the best running back duo in the country, you better use them. And with how those two ran last year and how they're probably going to run behind this offensive line this year, I think it's going to be a 55, 56% run again this year. Penn State wants to be a run first team, and then when they have to, they can beat you with the pass as well.
When we had you on for Minnesota, we were talking about the run to pass ratio, and we were discussing like 60-40, maybe even up to 65-35, depending on how the passing game goes for the
Yeah.
Golden Gophers. And what's interesting is that now we're having you on for Penn State, and we're talking about a similar kind of ratio here with
Yeah,
60-40.
yeah, and obviously you want to be close to 50-50, and it's going to be interesting because what happens when you take out garbage time, right? If you take out the garbage time snaps, what's really more likely? So in non-garbage times, it's probably going to be a little bit closer to 50-50, but uh, at the end of the day, all good teams have to be able to run the ball. All good offenses have to be able to run the ball. And if you're able to run the ball as successfully as Penn State has the last few years, even if you have a mediocre wide receiver room, you're going to have success because the run, helps set up the pass all so much in these offenses, especially an offense like Andy Colton Nicky's, that is, you know, uh, predicated on making the defense uncomfortable, giving different looks, and a lot of those same run looks, there's pass plays involved in that. Pass plays out as those same looks as well. So it's maybe not 60-40 or 57 43, but it's definitely going to lean towards the run game for Penn State this year, even with the improved passing attack.
And for our college football fantasy players, um, it's an interesting situation for Penn State going into the Oregon game because the non-conference is pretty manageable. Where I'm getting at with this, and then they have the bye week before Oregon, is that we'll see what the play calling is for Penn State because they may not want to show a ton before that Oregon game.
Absolutely. Penn State has known to they won't hide too much, but they're not going to empty their playbook before Oregon. They're not probably going to empty their playbook against Oregon. They're going to keep things saved up for the entirety of the season. Um, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do offensively those first three games because let's be honest, it's Nevada, FIU, Villanova, I believe.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, um, that none of those games should be close. All those games should be over by halftime or midway through the third quarter. So, yeah, I think it's going to be pretty vanilla for the most part until that Oregon game. But come that Oregon game, we saw what Penn State was able to do last year against Oregon, and that was with a lackluster passing attack. I think Penn State's going to be able to do maybe even more against Oregon this year, just with what they have. I'm not a big believer in that Oregon defense per se against superior offenses, just because I think Oregon's offense holds back the defense to a degree. You can scoring fast is great, but if you score too fast and you're putting a defense that's good but not great out there, you're going to get burned. And we saw that playing with Oregon in big games last year. So I like how Penn State matches up though in that game. And I think guys like Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and then maybe a Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross are any of those guys could be have a big game against the Ducks based off what we saw last year.
So I ask you this question with Minnesota with both the offense and the defense. When you look at this Penn State offense overall, I guess besides quarterback with potential, regression from first to second string, as practically every team would
Yeah,
have, what other position group on the team needs to stay healthy with the starters?
wide receiver. Running backs, they have like I said, they have a stable running back. So now if they lose Singleton and Allen, they're in trouble. There's no doubt about it. I like the stable of running backs, but asking three young guys to step in for two future NFL backs would be terribly bad for Penn State. If they lose one of Singleton and Allen, they could survive. There will be the running game would take a hit still, but wide receiver, if they lose one, they could probably survive. If they lose two, Penn State's wide receiver room is kind of back to square one where it was last year. They'd still have probably at least one wide receiver who could get open, which would be still an improvement from last season, but it would definitely not be a a good ordeal for Penn State to lose multiple starting wide receivers this year. I feel good about their depth at offensive line and at tight end. So yeah, definitely wide receiver.
Moving over to the Penn State defense, there's some production and some players to replace up front, but the few players that do return are some of the top names in college football when you look at defensive linemen, including Danny Dennis Sutton, and then there's Zane Durant inside. And there's with Penn State, it's like they have one athletic freak after another rushing the opposing quarterback. So, Dylan, give us the overall outlook for this defensive line. Do you think it takes a step back, or do you think that this unit is just as good as what it's been the last few years?
Um, I think the best answer for that is to be determined. I mean, I think they're going to lose a step just with not having um, Abdul Carter, obviously, and they also lost, I mean, Vanover and Smith Vilbert, but denied Dennis Sutton is really, really good. And he's going to be a first round talent potentially next year. Zariah Fisher missed last season with a torn ACL, I believe. He's back this year. He brings a ton of potential off the other side. And defensive tackle does take a step back. They had six guys last year to start the season that they could reliably trust. They now have one and a half, two if Alonzo Ford Jr. can stay healthy. But outside Zane Durant, tight end, defensive tackle is a big question mark into the season, in my opinion. But at defensive end, I really like the potential of Denai Dennis Son, Zariah Fisher, Jalen Harvey, Malachi Williams. They did have another player in there, Max Granville, a redshirt freshman, who played 7 games last year with the playoffs included. And he was going to be had a big role this season. But uh, as it was publicly reported today, he's out. While we're recording this is June 5th, so I'm not sure when it's going to go up. But when we're recording this, it just went public that he's going to miss probably most of the season, if not all, with a torn ACL. So that is a significant hit to the Penn State defensive line room as well. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a good defensive line room. Going to be a little bit of a step back from last year, of course, but I don't think it's going to be a bad room by any means. I think there's still potential there, just maybe not as much uh, sack production coming from this unit as a season ago.
And so moving on to the linebackers, Rojas is back. I think he was the second leading tackler among the linebackers last season. What is the outlook overall for the linebackers? Is this a unit that you think will be just as good?
Another unit where I like potential. Tony Rojas, I think, took a nice step forward as a sophomore. Should take a really big step forward as a junior. I can see him being an All-America contention this season. Dominic DeLuca is Mr. Steady Eddie, as James Franklin likes to say, in the middle of that defense. Not the biggest guy, not the most athletic guy, just does everything really, really good. So he's going to have a role. And then you have Keon Wiley in that room, Dakari Nelson in that room. Keon Wiley missed most of last season with an injury. So he'll be a nice piece for them to bring back this season. Came in actually as a defensive end, so he does have that potential to slide down maybe as an edge rusher this season for Penn State if needed. Dakari Nelson is a former safety turn linebacker. They also went out in the portal and grabbed Amari Campbell from North Carolina in the spring. Um, I don't expect him necessarily to start this season, but I think he'll carve himself out a nice role. So Penn State has, I think, a nice linebacker room, not the best linebacker room in the Big Ten by any means, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily a weakness to start the season. If they suffer a few injuries there, it would become concerning. But I like the top three, four in that room heading into the fall.
And the fact that picking up Amari Campbell in the spring, and then if he's not even going to be, a starter, then I think that says something at least about the top 2 to 3 guys here for Penn State, because it's not like Amari Campbell is not a decent pickup in the portal.
No, yeah, exactly. It's Amari Campbell has, I think, the potential to, really become a nice piece for Penn State. down the road, he still has. I mean, he was really good last year for North Carolina, but I think that was also partly he was really good on the stat sheet. But it's one of those things where in a bad defense, somebody kind of has to step up and get, a big number of the stats. And he was kind of that guy in that he still has quite a bit of growth, I think, to go as a linebacker. But I think this is a linebacker that really has potential to be really, really good. It's just beyond DeLuca and Rojas, there's just not a ton of experience in that room. But I really do like the pickup of Amari Campbell. I'm not sure if that answers the point you're getting at there. I do apologize, kind of blanked on that early in the answer, but I do just overall like this linebacker room's potential from top to bottom.
I think you did a really good job answering the question. In conclusion, when you look at the front six, front seven here, it doesn't look like it has the depth that it's had in years past, but if the top players at each position stay healthy, like there's still like the top line talent here.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about health and development. Can the younger guys who aren't as experienced take that step forward? If so, they won't miss too much of a beat. I still think looking at the starting the front six for Penn State, since it's a 4-2-5, like the front six, I think there's still a lot of potential there. I think it's going to be a really good front six. Maybe not as good as last year, but still top of the near the top of the Big Ten, some of the best in the country. And as a whole, I think the starting 11 is going to be one of them. I still think this is overall a very good defense. The secondary is going to be the strength of this defense. But yeah, I would agree with that on paper, not the same level of depth as they've had these last few years. But this is going to be a team, I think, in 2025 that's more predicated on this offense, you know, being able to put up 40 points on most of the competition, and they're going to beat you by just outscoring you most time. They're going to stop most offenses too, but if they need to get into a shootout, this is going to be an offense built to get into a shootout. I think in that aspect, it's going to be a little bit more forgiven that they don't have maybe a true lockdown defense this year, but I think they're still going to have a really, really good, still maybe top 10, but probably at worst top 15 defense.
Yeah, and we were mentioning some of those opponents that Penn State faces that really from a talent standpoint, it doesn't matter if Penn State defense like regresses to where it's like only 20 like 18th in the country, or it still very well could be like, top 10, top 15 as you mentioned, but like more than half of these opponents really won't even be able to stay with Penn State to threaten them, kind of like you were hinting there. We talked about the non-conference earlier, but Northwestern, like Indiana's a good team, but like they have to go to Penn State. Do we really think they can, hang with them, like strike for strike or whatever that phrase is, like score for score? Do we really think that? I mean, a lot of these teams, it's like, can they stay with them from a body type perspective?
Yeah, it's certain. Like it's one of those things that a lot of people don't, I think, realize unless you uh, either attend a lot of games with a lot of big teams like Penn State or cover is that like there is a serious difference between the body type of a Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon level athlete and even um, the Iowas, Indianas, Rutgers of the world. I mean, it's kind of like we saw a lot with Alabama over the Nick Saban era, but it's grown to a lot more programs than that. But yeah, Penn State is just going to out athlete, out muscle most of the opponents on their schedule. Like we talked about, their first three games are going to be a cakewalk for Penn State. And, I know we'll probably get a little bit more into it before we end, but like teams like Northwestern, Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers, I'm not sure they're built in 2025 to compete with Penn State from a physical and athletic point of view in the Big Ten. And even UCLA, Iowa, Indiana, Michigan, I don't know if I forgot if I mentioned Michigan State are pushing it. The only two teams that really built, I think, to compete with Penn State toe to toe, if everybody brings their A game, is Ohio State and Oregon. this season. Now that doesn't mean somebody can't trip up Penn State. Great teams get tripped up all the time, but this Penn State team is definitely built to out muscle and out athlete 95% of teams in college football.
Right. And yeah, when we'll talk about the ceiling and floor for Penn State here
Yeah,
in a couple seconds. But yeah, like you said, Dylan, most of these teams are not built to hang with Penn State. It's just
yeah,
they would have, I mean, they would have to have everything go right. I mean, and we're talking about +4 turnover differential, where it's more like Penn State is shooting itself in the foot kind of thing.
yeah. And let me bring up this stat. Since
Oh, we're going
20,
sicko mode. I like it.
yeah, going sicko mode to a degree. So let me see. Since 2023, which was Penn State's Rose Bowl year, they're 23-2 as a favorite. The two losses are to Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl, which you can argue if we knew about who was opting out for Penn State before that game. Penn State's probably not the favorite. And the other loss was against Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl last year, which definitely a game that Penn State beat themselves in. Um,
That was
but
also like a
also,
pick 'em for a while, spread wise.
exactly, exactly. I think Notre Dame started as the favorite in that game, and then it flipped last minute to Penn State. Um, but I mean, it's really throw the Ole Miss Peach Bowl out of the window because of the opt-outs. Penn State, when they're a favorite, is pretty hard to beat. Um, Now, you could also point to them as an underdog in the same span. They're 0-4. So I mean, they kind of are very predictable in that way. If they're favored to win the game, they're going to win the game 90% of the time. And if they're favored to lose, they tend to lose. But I mean, you look at who they lost to last since 2023, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame.
Yeah,
Uh, Three teams who have competed for national championships. All three have appeared in the national championship game. This is who Penn State is. I mean, and that's the question of this season. Can they get over that hump? They are in a spot, as James Franklin likes to say, 95, 99% of the country would trade spots with Penn State today. But at Penn State, there's higher expectations than being in that top 1%. 1%. The expectations is to win a national championship, and they have fallen short of that the last few years. But there is no doubt that this Penn State team, over the last 3 years, has been one of the top five teams in all of college football. And I think any given Saturday can go out and compete with any other team in the country. And I think that's going to be the case this year. And for as much crap as James Franklin gets for losing those big games, I don't think he gets enough credit of what he has built at Penn State, especially considering how hard it is to recruit to Happy Valley. Yeah, I know, and going off on a tangent, I know people like to make fun of that whole airport uh, quote he gave last year, but the airport is a legitimate problem for Penn State. I mean, if they're traveling for a road game, they have to travel an hour to Harrisburg just to go to the airport. Uh, so I mean that's add an hour to travel. That adds an extra hour you can't game plan. I mean, and then for visitors, if recruits are coming to campus, they have to fly into Philly or Pittsburgh, and that's a 3 hour, 4 hour drive to State College. I mean, that's not exactly the greatest recruiting pitch of, yeah, come on an official visit. You can sit in a car ride for 6 to 7 hours of your weekend. I mean, it doesn't help. And it doesn't help when kids' parents want to come watch games, which is part of the recruiting pitch too, as well. So I don't think Franklin gets enough credit for what he's built in Penn State because the stats say they are right there with the best of the best. They just have to find a way to beat the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Notre Dames of the world. Um, and that's what this season's all about.
well, speaking of that, and we'll let that be the transition to the overall expectation for the
Yeah.
2025 Nittany Lions. So, for our viewers, and this is where like the hot topic questions come in. They want to know, is Penn State capable of winning the national championship? And I guess for the more talked about term, can they become elite and cross that threshold and win a big game?
I think they can. I think this is, to me, it is a, if not this season, when. Now, the same could have been said about last year. I think if Penn State makes the national championship game last year, did they beat Ohio State? Probably not, but I think they probably could have given Ohio State a run for their money. Historically, even though Penn State has struggled against Ohio State since beating them in 2016 in the win-loss column, historically those games are ultra close and usually come down to a player or two deciding the game. Tends to be, a big interception or such. But I mean, usually those plays come down one or two teams. Penn State matches up really well with Ohio State. So I think they could have done it last year, though I would have picked Ohio State. And I will say, I am to a point, and I said this last year, um, after they lost to Ohio State, um, maybe it was the year before, I forget at this point, to be honest. It's kind of Groundhog's Day with that matchup. Um, but I'm at the point where I will not pick Penn State against Ohio State again to win, or Penn State to win against Ohio State again, until Penn State can simply prove to me they can beat Ohio State. Um, so if you're asking me what Penn State's record's going to be this year, I'd probably say right now 11-1. I think they're going to beat Oregon in week 4. I think they probably lose to Ohio State in Columbus. Even if they're the better team, I think, even if they're a better team on paper, I just, for now, there it seems to be a block that Penn State cannot get over against Ohio State. We'll see if they can do that this year. But the good news for Penn State is you could lose to Ohio State. As long as you don't play them in the playoffs, you can still win a national championship. So I do think Penn State is a national championship contender this year. I think they have all the makings of being a true title contender. They have the quarterback, they have the running backs, they have the wide receivers to do so. A good offensive line, quality tight end. The defense maybe takes a step back, but still should be amongst the best in the country. The secondary is really good. They have all the tools to win a national championship. They just have to put it all together, and I really do think they have the chance to do that this year. Am I going to pick them to win the national championship? It's hard to say right now, but I think they're going to be in the semifinals again this year, and it's got to give a chance to anybody to win it all.
And I'm going to be honest with you, Dylan. If somebody asked me, "Hey Connor, who do you think's winning the national championship this year?" My answer would be three words: I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I think I've made this clear on our channel in several different videos. I think it's completely wide open this year when you're looking at the national championship and who's in the running for it. I
yeah.
really think that this year you could look at 10 teams, give or take one or two, that has a chance to win it all. And most years, I would say it's like three or four.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of parity this year, especially because Ohio State lost so much last year. Um, and but what's Georgia going to be this year? What Texas is going to be? There's just so many new faces and new places, especially at quarterback at all these schools. Like big year for Arch. Like we think Arch is going to be a dude, but can he do it over a full season? It's easy to say sure, but there's been plenty of quarterbacks in his shoes that haven't fulfilled that type of hype. I agree though. It's wide open this season. I'd probably say, proverbial gun in my head, it's going to be one of Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Clemson. I would say is like my top five choices right now. But um, yeah, I think you could open it up to 8, 10 teams, and I wouldn't make an argument. But that's a great thing about the college football playoffs is that I think a lot of people thought it's still going to, end up being the same results as in years past. And yeah, maybe so. Maybe the underdog doesn't win a ton of games, but all it takes is one bad day for a quarterback uh, or a kicker or anybody. It takes one bad day for one player to change the tide of a college football playoff game and a national championship path. So I do think it's wide open. I think the playoffs do add quite a bit of parity to the game because there will be upsets along the way as this goes on, as it expands. And it really does feel like there is no one team in football that is clearly above the rest this year, as it has in years past.
And you asked that question earlier, Dylan. If not this year for Penn State, when? And you were giving some stats just a few minutes ago. I'll give a stat here. So when you're looking at some of the most talented teams and proven in terms of their capability of winning like huge games or going on a national championship kind of run with Georgia and recently Ohio State. So if you're looking at Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, and Oregon as arguably the four most accomplished teams in recent years, of course, I don't know if I'd put Oregon quite up in that category, Texas recently, but in returning production, this is where those four teams rank. Ohio State, 101st, Texas, 103rd, Georgia, 105th, and Oregon, 109th. Now, just because teams don't return a lot doesn't just because you have questions doesn't mean you have weaknesses. But when you have so many teams with so many questions, it creates this higher level of variance. It creates
Yep.
more uncertainty, obviously, which also can mean lower floors for some of those top teams, which again creates more variance, more likelihood of upsets. And to our point that we're kind of hinting at here, a team like a Penn State to break through and have that window of opportunity to cash in on a big season. So, like,
And
I think that I'm sorry, Dylan, just one
no,
last
no,
thing here.
no, you're good.
I guess the bigger question is for Penn State. It's not so much can they, because clearly from a talent standpoint this year, especially, they can. I guess it's more of will they? Is that fair?
Absolutely, 100%. And all I was going to add is um, uh, 2 years, maybe not a trend, but a trend, perhaps evolving is 2023. What do we see? Or post 2022 going into 2023, what do we see? We saw Michigan bring back everybody they could possibly bring back, add in the transfer portal to for that senior group to make one last run. What happened? They won the national championship. Last season, Ohio State sees their biggest rival win the national championship, which I said as soon as Michigan won the national championship, that was the best thing that could have happened to Ohio State. I felt like Ohio State was getting a little bit complacent with being Ohio State. But, you know, seeing your biggest rival win the national championship is probably a good swift kick in the butt. Not to mention the on-field results recently. But what did they do? They brought back everybody they could. They went to the transfer portal, added to the team. What happened? It was a little bumpy along the way, but they won the national championship. That's the only thing that matters. What did Penn State do this offseason? Brought back everybody they possibly could, added the transfer portal. Now, can they finish the story like Michigan, Ohio State did the last 2 years? Um, I it's we saw it to a degree in not even to a degree. We've seen it happen in college basketball for a good amount of the last decade or so. Is that the successful teams in college basketball are usually those teams that are able to keep guys for 3, 4 years and win and eventually, break through. We saw as somebody grew up in Pennsylvania, Villanova, those Jay Wright teams were all built around the team culture of sticking together. Now, in the transfer portal era, it's a little bit tougher to say the least, but I think we're going to see teams like Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State use their NIL dollars, maybe not so more so for recruiting or transfer portal. They'll still do that, but enticing those maybe late round draft picks to come back for another season. Because depending on where you get drafted, you could make more money coming back to school.
Right. And
So
so
I just think that's to a degree where what we're gonna see as a trend going forward, especially with those teams that are in similar shoes like Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State have been, that they're right there. If you come back for another season, perhaps, we could bring everything can come together and make this run.
And with what's happening with the House settlement right now, I think you're going to see more and more teams begin to use their money and allocate their money to keep players rather than try to spend a ton of dollars to get players in the portal. I also have a take in regards to that. Like, I don't think the portal talent is as good as what it was a couple or a few years ago. Do you think that's fair?
Absolutely. And um, it's not a perfect analogy, but it's kind of like prospects in baseball. Um, I I'm a Phillies fan, so yeah, I'd like the Phillies to keep some of their top prospects, but at the same time, if you can get a proven commodity for your top prospects, who, while they still may be top prospects, there's still a big question mark. There's no guarantee that when they get called up to the majors, they're going to be, turn into the player that they're projected to be. But if you know you're getting a proven commodity in somebody, why not go with that proven commodity, right? I think with the transfer portal, you see it especially at some key positions like wide receiver. Um, they there's a lot of wide receivers that go out and get a ton of money in transfer portal and just don't end up doing much other than school. If you know there's a player in your program that fits, can be successful in your program, in your scheme, why not try to keep them around for one more season rather than go out and get an unknown? Because a lot of it too is guys making the jump from the group of five to the power of four, and that's a tough jump. A lot of guys, some guys can do it, a lot of guys can't. It is not a the transfer portal has good players, but they are not it is not a perfect system where, these guys are going to all be able to come in and make immediate impact. Some will, but a lot of those guys are going to bust considering what they're probably being paid.
Yep, I agree with that. And there's also a difference of building a team through the portal and then filling holes in the portal. You might be able to
Right.
get a player here or there for a position group in question, but if you're trying to build a team in the portal, first of all, forget about getting depth in the portal. Why are guys entering the portal? For money and snaps mostly.
Yeah.
You think they're going to enter the portal if they're not going to get the increased snaps? So
And plus, I mean, and it may work out for a year. We've seen it work out for a year. Mel Tucker at Michigan State, great example of a transfer portal team working out for one year. But it's impossible to build a team culture when you're doing that, and it's impossible to build a consistent winner because there's just going to be so much, so many variables that go into a team built primarily through the transfer portal being successful year in and year out, and you're just counting on too many guys to match expectations or exceed.
And so, with us previewing, so for our viewers, if you're wondering why we're talking about all this stuff with the portal and bringing back players and allocating your money to bring back some of those top guys, it's kind of what we're hinting at here, and what Dylan was hinting at with the 2023 Michigan squad, and then last year with Ohio State, keeping some of those top players, doing all that they could to build up those teams in those respective years. And Dylan, do you think it's fair to term Penn State this year as an all-in team?
Yeah, yeah. Seeing what they did with bringing back all those guys, absolutely. They went all in on this year because can they be a playoff team in 2026, 2027? Absolutely. I'll say this in the expanded 16 team playoff that is eventually coming. Penn State should be in the college football playoffs every single year. That is the type of program that Penn State has become. Yes, there'll be down seasons. We've seen it out of every program, but 9 times out of 10, Penn State should be a college football playoff contender. So they'll always have a shot, but this is their best shot. This is their best chance of of making that run of, you know, um, being immortalized in Happy Valley forever. If it doesn't happen this year, I just don't know when it's going to happen for Penn State because you have the quarterback, you have the running backs, the wide receivers are better, the defense is still going to be good. Um, you have maybe the best offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator combo in the country. That's not going to be around forever. Um, it's all there, and I mean that we didn't even talk about Jim Knowles. Best defense coordinator in all of college football. They go and they pay him $30 million to come to Penn State. Uh, Another example of them going all in. I think James Franklin knows what's at stake here. I think he knows the pressure that is going to be on this team to win it this year, and I think they're going all in to win it all.
So one position group we haven't talked about yet, and you said it's probably going to be the strength for the defense this season, the secondary. As our time winds down here on this second Zoom meeting, we've had a lot to talk about for Penn State. So overall, I guess how good do you think the secondary can be this year?
I think it could be one of the best in the country. They returned quite a bit of talent in this secondary, all around. Kind of bring out the depth chart here again. At corner, they have AJ Harris, potential first round draft pick. Opposite him is Elliot Washington, who has a chance to be a pretty high draft pick himself, maybe not first round, but second, third round. Um, at safety, they returned Zakee Wheelie, one of their top guys from last year. Dejon Lane, a sophomore, returns this year. They got King Mack back out of the transfer portal after he spent 1 year at Alabama after originally starting his career at Penn State. They have a couple other young up and comers at safety as well. At corner, they have a couple up and coming guys as well. Davian Collins, not really young, he's a redshirt junior, but he's going to have a big year this season, I think, for them as their third guy. Kenny Wosley is a young guy to watch. Darius Dixon, another young guy to watch. I think that secondary is going to be really, really good this year, and um, should be able to shut down most opponents. I don't know if anybody's shutting down Ohio State this year, but they should be good for they should be really good 11 games out of 12 this season, I think. And then I think they'll be able to hold their own against Ohio State. It's just a matter of how much when and it seems like when and not if Ohio State's going to burn you. So it's just a matter of how many times will Ohio State get the best of Penn State in that game because you're not going to shut down Jeremiah Smith and that Ohio State receiving core for an entire game. But I think they can hold their own for the most part.
Well, Dylan, fantastic job going over the 2025 Penn State Nittany Lions for all of us. One last time for our viewers, tell them where they can find your content.
Yeah, you can find me right now at Rivals Dylan CC. I'm sure that will probably be undergoing a change here in the next couple months once not next couple weeks once the Rivals on three merger happens. So if you're listening to this down the road, it'll probably be Dylan CC on three at that point. But find me over there on X at Rivals Dylan CC. And you can find my work over on Rivals right now. Happy Valley Insider, Gophers Nation, have some stuff over at their Oregon State side and Michigan State side as well. So you can find me a bunch of different places on the Rivals Network right now. But if you need to get in contact with me or have a question, Rivals Dylan CC on X is probably the best place.
Well, again, Dylan, really good job, and we appreciate you being on the channel again.
Thanks for having me, Connor. Appreciate it.